Jake Paul versus Ben Askren. As reported to you, in all fairness, by yours truly, right? Wasn't some kind of insider knowledge. Jake Paul got a hold of me and said, put this out, I'm fighting Ben Askren. But then it got delayed. And now it's reported it's officially signed, officially announced. So I can't talk about Paul without giving him his due. I mean, I got to give him credit. Everywhere I turn, I have to give him credit. Even when he came into the sport as this is something I want to do, and yes, it's a cash grab and all these things, but he was very upfront and he found a way to do it. Found a way to make himself a main event of a sport that he had never done before. Oh, by the way, selling out completely and competing with the same numbers that Canelo and Triple G were doing. I mean, he found a way. And one thing we do know about Paul from his very last fight is he's working on fighting. He is showing up in shape, and he is showing up with the mindset, and he is trying to win. You can discuss his opponent. I understand these things. I saw it too. I'm just sharing with you. He deserves a level of credit here for making things interesting, and now he's stepping in with a real athlete. That's a real athlete. Ben Askren is a guy who knows how to win. When the lights are on and people are watching, right? What's the difference when we're having fun or when we're competing? Well, if we're keeping score, things just changed. Askren knows how, when you're keeping score, to make that change and get his hand raised. That's a real fight against a real fighter. You could go back to the Olympic days. You could go back to the NCAA days, to the Hodge Trophy days. You could fast forward to the Bellator champion days or the ONE FC champion day. That's a real fight with a real fighter. And Paul had his choice of guys, and he chose to take on a two-time national champion, a United States Olympian, and a two-time, at two different weight classes, world mixed martial arts champion. That happened. And there seems to be something very funny going around with some people that don't know fighting, which represents most of the people, and that's okay. When I say that, I don't mean to be like looking down from you for my lurch. I have a very rare knowledge of a very rare thing. That's a weird thing. To know about fighting an unarmed car, that's a weird thing. I dedicated my life to a weird thing. But when you hear other people's opinions, that's just when you get reminded that nobody knows a damn thing about fighting. To act as though you saw a shadow boxing clip of Ben Askren, and then you saw Jake Paul knock out a dude from the NBA, and therefore Paul is going to beat Askren. I mean, it's really weird, but it drives a really weird industry. I mean, boxing and unarmed combat as a whole, that's a very bizarre industry. Think about it from an industry standard, right? Because you have to back it up to the grassroots. Somebody opens a gym. So imagine that business model. Somewhere you've got to rent space and you got to come up with money and you got to line this thing out and you got to pay your bills every month. You got to staff it in some fashion. You got to have some hot water for a shower. There's some expense that comes along with it. And what you're going to do is you're going to get parents to bring their kids and pay you to get their kid punched and kicked in the face. I mean, from an industry standard, it's very bizarre. I love it and you guys love it, but let's just admit we're in something very bizarre, and it does remind me of the Kimbo Slice days. Kimbo Slice had the look, he had the mystique, he had the backstory, and he legit had power. Like, if he never went into a gym one single day, but he got in a fight and he connected, it's not going to be great for the person he connects with. He just was born with this natural power. But if you put him in there, even with just an okay, Seth Petrozelli, no disrespect, he was an okay fighter from down a weight class who gave up 60 pounds on 24 hours notice. He was an okay fighter who threw an okay jab and knocked Kimbo out cold. I mean, it's one of those things where no matter how tough the guy is, if he's not trained, right? I mean, it's one of these things. You look at the Paul fight with the basketball player. Paul looked really good in that fight, for a guy who hadn't done a lot of this, taking on a guy who had never done this. It's not Paul looked really good in that fight, period. It's Paul looked really good in that fight, for a guy who, right, it's one of these deals, and I really respect Paul and the fact that he's taken a real fight, and we were having a completely different conversation. If anyway, come hook or crook, he gets the jump on Ben Askren. If Paul got the jump on any NCAA champion for any sport, I would personally be impressed. But from a combat sport, I mean, you're talking about a whole nother ruggedness. You're talking about a whole nother level of toughness. You're talking about a whole nother level of conditioning. You're talking about a whole nother level of calmness. You're talking about a whole nother level of guy who knows how to prepare. And not to mention, Paul gave him full fair warning. I mean, all of these things, I just respect Paul. I know a lot of you guys hate him. I know he drives a lot of you guys crazy. But the mere fact, he didn't put this fight February 10th. He didn't put this fight February 15th. So Askren has no time to prepare coming off of a hip surgery. He put it 2 months out. He put it April 17th. That's fair warning. That's normal, fair warning. I mean, any advantage or any jump that he did nothing underhanded. I just think that you need to consider that when you're talking about Paul can beat Askren. You're talking a level of silliness, but just hold the thought. Enjoy the sport, right? I don't want to ruin it for you. I don't want to ruin the ending for you. Cling to that rough idea that you have that you saw him knock out a guy from the NBA. A fight that I watched and a name that I can't produce. I just know the guy did like a slam dunk contest in the NBA. Compare that to a guy that's got a 20-2 record in combat over 2 different weight classes and 3 different organizations. Okay, save the thought. One thing that I also like about Paul is he's an entertainer. Came from the world of YouTube, but he is an entertainer. And every actor wants to be an athlete. Every athlete wants to be an actor. There's no way around that. And the athletes can't just make that happen. But the actor in large part can. Now, the actor will seek out a director. He will seek out financiers. And he will seek out a script specifically to allow him to live his athletic dream, even if it's fake. I'm trying to think of this guy. He was in City Slickers, and his name is Billy Crystal. Billy Crystal was a very big deal in Hollywood for a period of time, but wanted to be a baseball player. Every actor wants to be an athlete, and every athlete wants to be an actor. I can't tell you how true that statement is, but Billy Crystal wanted to be a baseball guy. He just didn't have any skill for baseball. So he went out and he found people to put up millions of dollars and put him in the lead role of a baseball movie. So he got to wear the jersey, he got to hold the bat, even if the whole thing was fake, but you will see things like this. And I could go down the list of every boxing movie ever made was made by somebody who wanted to be a boxer. And he couldn't do it, so he went and pretended to do it on TV to fill that void. I'm sharing with you that in Paul's scenario, where he is an entertainer, I don't know if I can go as far as to call him an actor. He wasn't on the big screen in these things, but largely the same thing. And largely he could make a living just fine, but it wasn't his dream. But he's not going out and making a movie with a written-in script with a stunt double to fill in and do all of the hard work. He's taking himself to the ring, and he's doing it. I only tell you that because you can be as annoyed at Paul as you want, and is resistant of the fact that he's getting to live this dream. You can do all those things that you want, but no promoter called him and called Ben Askren and worked this out. Paul did this. Paul chose an opponent. I submit for you, he made a grave mistake in who he chose. But he's going to walk out there and do it anyway. And he's going to prepare for it anyway, and he expects to win. And if he shoves this up my ass and it turns out I'm one of these guys that knows nothing about fighting, that's what it will be. This will be a wake-up call for the ages that I will never deny or resist or attempt to put a bow on. Jake Paul can beat Askren and anything. I will never attempt. I will say, well, I guess I guess I'm not. I'm not an elite analyst. I don't have an elite skill. That is how silly this matchup is. But Paul asked for it. And that shows bravery. And it shows courage. And the days of him being a weird internet sensation are gone. Paul's in the club now. Or he will be on April 17th.